Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. I'm super excited for a slight change of pace. You will not see a whole lot of me presenting our product. Instead, my coworkers, Mónika and Daniel, will talk about user experience, and I'm extremely excited to see what they have to present today, so I will hand it over to them.
Thank you very much, Chris.
Thank you, and good evening, good afternoon.
Thank you very much for being here and taking the time to listen to our webinar today. During today's webinar, we are going to talk about how investing in user experience research and design can pay off in the long run. How can you incorporate user experience research and design into your workflow? And what are some practices and methods we use during our work? So if you have any questions during the presentation, feel free to write it in the chat at the end of the webinar. We will have a Q&A session where we can answer your questions. So some use cases we can help you with. If you want to develop a portal from scratch, or you need help with the information architecture on your portal, or if you need help with feature design or redesign, or you want to test and validate your solution, we can help you. Or if you want to have a picture about the current situation of your portal and find the low-hanging fruits to proceed further, feel free to contact us on our email, or you can find the link in the chat where you can reach us on our site as well. So first of all, let's talk about how investing in user experience pays off in the long run. If you design a portal that is with the needs of both the business and the users in mind, the result is a portal that is intuitive, useful, and pleasant to use, which is important because incorporating user experience design activities into the standard development process would seem to add cost to projects. However, these activities actually save time and money if we design the right solution from the beginning, and if we find and correct problems early in the project when they are easy and inexpensive to change. So people will always have an experience, good or bad, when using a portal, and the quality of the user experience can have a very tangible business impact. It can potentially lead to increased sales, satisfied customers, good ratings and reviews, and good recommendations from those customers. So altogether, when the user interface is designed by someone who knows and applies principles of human factors and design best practices, many UX problems can be avoided, which would be more costly to change after the development. And let's see, if we think about the pros and cons when development happens without research and design. So usually the client defines what to develop in this phase, and the process starts with the solution. The front end or architect decides the layout, but the user perspective is missing, so no UX research or design is involved in the process. And it may seem that the benefits are that the first delivery is fast, it looks cheaper, there is lower client involvement and commitment needed, but soon it might turn out that the drawbacks are costly changes, bad user experience, questionable user fit, and the visuals, layout, and the usage are defined by developers, which might lead to missing UX practices, basically. Okay, so let's see when design is involved in the process. Still, the client defines what to develop. So the process starts with the solution, but the design now is based on client needs, and thus there is a low representation of end user needs. Since no research is involved, the first delivery is relatively fast. The UX is better now. There's a good look and feel, but the drawbacks are that it's a hit and miss. So we cannot be sure that we solve real user problems. And also there's a high chance that changes will be needed later, which will be more costly. But if research is involved from the very beginning of a project, the client defines the problem, but business and user needs are also considered in the process. So strategic design and research is involved, which means that we take into consideration the business and the user needs and information architecture. And the benefit can be a quality portal, which really improves people's life, solves real problems and business needs. And the drawbacks, of course, might be that the delivery is slower, but higher client involvement and commitment are needed, which leads to that co-creation inspires better solutions. So the main message here is that the cost of redevelopment is much more expensive in time and money later in the process than if we base our design and development decisions on discovering the user needs. To understand why it's important to have a solid foundation, let's take a look at the 5 layers of the user experience design. If we want to ensure positive user experience on the portal, we need to make complex decisions between the ideation phase and the final polished portal. So these layers provide structure and direction to the process of making these decisions to ensure each decision is made at the appropriate point in the process. So the 5 layers, as you can see, are strategy, scope, structure, skeleton, and surface. And let's dive a bit into what these actually mean. So on the strategy, it is the first layer. In this phase, we usually gather information and lay the foundation by keeping in view both the needs of the users and the business objectives, because we need to know who the users are, as well as their needs, their pain points. In the next layer, in the scope, it's about deciding on the idea, the type of content. So the question of whether a feature and or a content is included on a site is a question of scope. So the third layer is the structure. Here we decide the organization of this content and feature, and how the system will behave when the user interacts with the platform. The next layer is the skeleton. Here we put together the previous pieces to determine the visual form of the design. So here the designers usually decide the flow of information and movement from one screen to the other, and they also make sure that the navigation is smooth and the presentation of information facilitates user understanding. The final layer is the structure. It is basically the combination of the layers below. So the UI designers decide on the layout of the visuals, typography, styling, and colors, and they finalize the final surface that the user is going to interact with. So it's basically what you see when you arrive at a portal. And the important consideration here is that we shouldn't build the roof of the house before we know the shape of its foundation, because if the choices we make don't align with those above and below, there is a high chance that projects derail, deadlines are missed, and costs are very high as the development team tries to piece together components that don't naturally fit. So it can even lead to that the users might not like the portal or have difficulties with using it, which means that decisions on the context, so the strategy will have a sort of ripple effect all the way up the chain. And as you can see, it's important to have a solid foundation for these complex decisions. So as a foundation for building a house, starting with the context to make business and user goals aligned by stakeholder interviews and user interviews is important. And on top of that, we should take care of the information architecture, the content, the interaction design, and the final step is the visual design. User research can help in exploring the context. By talking to the users, we can explore the problem space, the needs and motivation of users. If we have a clear understanding of our users and their mental models, we can make sure that our solution will be relevant to them. So interviews can be particularly useful to reveal problems and to find opportunities for the future, for a scope if you're not sure what you want to improve, but if you want to identify the improvement parts of the portal. And also, it's important that starting with research so soon in the process means that the impact of the research will be much stronger, because assumptions are a great risk. Research shows that approximately 90% of assumptions are wrong, because we just cannot simply see what's in the user's mind, and it's much cheaper to iterate on the plan if we start by exploration. So research can help a lot if there are uncertainties that make it difficult to make decisions about the portal, basically. And users always arrive at the portal to solve a problem. So with research, we can also find out what they need to achieve, their goal. And by researching early in the process, we can see which features are the most valuable to them, so that we don't spend money and time on building features that aren't even needed for them. In this phase, analytics can also give a hint to researchers and designers both about the problem areas, and they can validate our assumptions. To give you a quick example, in case if you plan to build a mobile version of the platform, you can check how many of your users even use mobile before investing in that, because it might turn out that a very low percentage of users use mobile devices, which was also reassured by the developers whom we talked with during interviews. So the main message here is that it's far less expensive to make changes during the early phases of development in the design phase. Information architecture is also a key part. Deciding how to organize and maintain your content to help users navigate easily on your portal means that they can find what they're looking for quickly, which makes them satisfied. And on the other hand, you can find what contents and features are relevant on the site. Research can also help with the information architecture, because with tree testing and card sorting, you can test if the sitemap is relevant. An outcome of our information architecture workshop can be personas and user journeys. As you can see here, a few examples. Personas basically help you empathize with your users, understand who they are, what is their motivation when using your portal, what are they trying to achieve. So you can understand what contents and features do they use. And during the user journeys, we can understand what is the workflow of them. So what steps do they need to take in order to achieve their goals? Value feasibility matrix and sitemaps are also an outcome of the information architecture workshop. You can plan what is feasible strategically. So what needs to be on the developer portal in the next phase. So if you plan a blog, for example, you need someone to write it and keep it maintained. So if you don't have someone who maintains it, then it can be planned to the next phase. Another possible outcome of the workshop is a sitemap, which helps you in how the content and features should be structured on the portal to allow easy navigation and problem solving. We can also help with the content building block, but I won't go into much detail about this section. It's not the scope of today's webinar, but our technical writers can help you with the content also. So if you're interested, don't hesitate to reach out. And also, if you know that somewhere is friction, because let's say you received feedback from the users about some parts of the portal, by usability testing, you can see how the users are actually using a feature, for example, how they behave and interact with the portal, and where improvement is needed. So again, testing a prototype early can save time and money, because usability testing reveals a more realistic view about the real user needs, because we as humans often find it difficult to elaborate verbally on what we really need. So instead, watching users live solving certain tasks on the portal, observing them, what they do, is far more accurate than traditional requirements gathering. So even when the challenge is to build something completely new, it's extremely valuable to observe and understand what the intended users do now that the future portal will replace. And research shows that 5 participants for a scope reveals 80% of the improvement areas, which means that in a relatively short period of time, by watching the user solving a few tasks on a challenging part of the portal, can lead to insights that in the end help the design decision. And if you're looking for a close collaboration with our designers, they can also help you with UX consultancy and design, but Dani will speak about design in more detail soon. And last but not least, visual design is basically what you see when looking at the portal. So after something is done, you can still ask the users to use the solution to validate if it really solves their problem. Of course, it's better to do research in the very beginning of a process, but if you can't, it's better to do research at all when where you are currently in the process. So these were some insights about how investing in research can pay off in the long run, and how can you incorporate research into your workflow, and what are some practices we use as researchers. And now I will give you the word, Dani, to give you more detailed insight into the design part.
Thank you very much. Once again, hi and good evening, everybody. At least it's evening here for me in Hungary. What are user journeys and what are user flows? We quite often throw these words around. We quite often use these words interchangeably. And there's no really super hard limits on which is which. But here at Pronovix, user journeys are short, succinct texts for us, which are core of the user need as a sort of definition. And it's usually taken the shape of a statement sentence like, as a developer, as a business persona, I want to do this and this to achieve that and that. A user flow is much more detailed, much more comprehensive. It has step-by-step documentation showing every granular step the user needs to take to achieve the goal set in the user journey. It shows where do we start from, it shows where do we end up at, and it also helps us to discover a lot of dependencies and challenges. It can show us if it's too complicated, if it's in a loop, if it has too many distinct pathways or even too little. And it shows where we can join different user flows together to create a larger, more comprehensive final user flow. And these together will help us, both the UX personnel here at Pronovix and you, the client, to define a better solution, a better situation. Thank you. And the next one. Why do these matter? Why do we care about so much these? Why don't we just start designing? Why don't we just start wireframing out of the top of our head? These journeys can help us identify pain points, bottlenecks, find solutions. It can show us if a certain step is too difficult to a user, or if they need to find some extra help, if they need to find a contact us solution in case of an error state, for example. And it shows up a lot of experience enhancement possibilities. What happens if we don't care about them? What happens if we say, okay, we don't need user journeys, we don't need user flows? We will be very unsure of our steps. We won't be really confident about what the user is doing, how the user is doing, and what comes after what. We can miss dependencies, we can miss improved important connections. Eventually, we can miss important user experience enhancement points. And in a way, it can be quite single-focused and shallow. If the statement is, I want a catalog to find my APIs, of course, we can deliver a catalog to find APIs, but we can miss a lot of nuance. We can miss a lot of extra benefits. Thank you very much. So let me show you an example, an actual example, a lifelike example, a realistic example. For example, the requirement, the client comes to us, we need to show lifecycle info of our APIs. We want to let our developer consumers know what is the lifecycle state of an API. So we create user journeys for this. As an external developer, I want to see which APIs are coming soon, which APIs are going to be deprecated, which APIs are live and healthy. As an internal manager, I want to edit the lifecycle info of the company's APIs. We already know that there are more than one user journeys and more than one aspects. You also need to take care of the internal users, the in-house users, the provider users, not only the end consumer users. And we can raise, even right here at the very, very beginning, we can raise questions like, can anonymous users see the lifecycle info? Can they have this information? Or what lifecycle are we talking about? Lifecycle of the OAS file, lifecycle of the server? It is also an important question we need to ask ourselves. And it can yield different journeys and eventually different designs. Thank you very much. And this is a much more detailed user journey and user flow outcome. I don't expect you to zoom in. We will make it possible to see the details, but you can see a bottleneck at the very beginning with a pink or magenta question mark, raising a question. We need to find the solution to that. And eventually on the right-hand side, the green box is the final solution. When the user knows the lifecycle info, they're happy with that, they can work with it. And even this very simple statement that I want to show lifecycle info of our APIs in our catalog yields this relatively complicated user flow showing dependencies. It has pathways to support, knowledge sharing, and some questions to answer. And these questions can be answered in a short 20, 30, 40-minute call with a client where we can explore the possibilities and fix the answer. Why do sitemaps matter? Why do we care about sitemaps that much? A good sitemap, as Moni already explained to us, helps to define the structure and the hierarchy very early on. We can understand how complicated the data set is, how complicated the structure you as a client imagined and want to show. If it needs a more comprehensive menu system, for example, if we need to chop up pieces of information, pieces of content into smaller bits, it helps showcase the complexity. Where does it overflow? Where is it too much? And where is it too little? How we can balance it to make it a better navigational and understanding experience for the user. And it's very important. The third sentence is a very pivotal one. No page or no feature is on its own. It's never just floating alone in a big void of nothingness. It always has dependencies. It connects to the home page, it connects to the support page, the FAQ, maybe some third-party services, maybe a gateway. We need to understand what connects to what. What happens if we don't care about a sitemap? What happens if we say, okay, we don't need sitemap. It's going to be very simple. It's going to be one pager. Let's just go with it. We can have a chaotic navigation. We can have a haphazard navigation. We can create endless loops, and we can create pages or subpages which cannot be navigated from the main navigation, which can be a very, very bad user experience if you think about that. And we can fall into quote unquote rabbit holes because it might mean that we only discover how complex and multi-leveled, many-tiered hierarchical system is when we start to develop it. And we might say, okay, it's too much. We need to stop. If we had a sitemap earlier, we could evade it. This is, of course, just a piece of a sitemap. On the left-hand side, it's a skeleton of a sitemap. Yellow stickies represent pages and subpages. Orange stickies represent menu categories. Blue stickies represent content elements, and the green ones represent feature elements, interactable elements. And I enhanced one part of it from the middle which is the lifecycle info subpage of the knowledge center, of the knowledge sharing center. So this is the part where the user can learn about lifecycle. What does different life cycles mean? What they refer to? How they can change? What does it mean to their use cases? And of course, they can contact the provider to ask a few more questions. Maybe they have a problem, or they can jump right into a life cycle catalog, for example. So this is just a small representation how we can explore connections and interdependencies with a good sitemap. What kind of inputs do we need when we are designing these strategic elements, user journeys, user flows, sitemaps? We need to understand your business needs, both the outspoken one, what you bring to us, and we need to discover the hidden ones, the unknown ones, the ones you yourself don't yet know. We also need to understand user needs, as I mentioned, both the provider and the consumer side. If there are technical limitations, legal limitations, security limitations, we need to understand that, because just like I raised the question previously, can anonymous users see the lifecycle info? This is a decision from the client side. We need to understand if it's possible or not. Whom to involve in these steps? I'm not going to read the list. You can see it on my screen, but business decision makers, technical decision makers are a must-have, and maybe somebody who will use it. Future users, provider users, client users, and providers are very, very valuable at this stage, because they will be eventually handling the system. Why do we use low fidelity wireframes? These are quick, simple, snappy things. We can create them really rapidly, 10, 15 minutes. It's very cheap, it's very fast, it's easy to iterate. We can even do it in a call. In a 1 hour workshop session, we can create multiple low fidelity wireframes, so we can practically design and ideate together in a client call. And there is no noise. It's very important. We can focus on the core concept. If it's about a lifecycle info, we can focus on the lifecycle info. We will not get disturbed by a lot of other flashy things, search, filter, footer, FAQ, whatever. These will be important later on. But at the core, we are talking about lifecycle now. So let's just focus on lifecycle. That's a low fidelity wireframe, great for it. And it is very good to understand and deliver basic concepts to clients, architects, developers, product owners, product managers. Mid-fidelity and high-fidelity wireframes are for technical validations, client validations, and eventually handovers and demos. These are the flashy, polished ones. These are the beautiful ones, which shows every detail, and eventually it shows even the working, the interactions of the page. So here you can see a few, of course, white label low fidelity wireframes. On the left-hand side, a little bit distanced from the others, is a typical low fidelity API card. It has a title, a few category tags or category pairs, a short description, and 2 links. Now let's start to ideate. Okay, where do I put the lifecycle info? Where does it fit? And I created a few quick sketches. Altogether, these 6 were under 5 minutes. Tuck, 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 it's done. And I can understand, okay, which one works, which one doesn't work. Maybe on the upper right corner is not good enough. It feels a little bit off. On the bottom right corner feels like a button, but it's not a button. What if I put the lifecycle info up in line with the title? What happens with longer titles? What if the API card title is long? Where do I put the lifecycle info then? So I can ideate visually, and I can already see the problems, already see the situations, the edge cases where it will not work. So I can, or we together with you, the client, and the architect and the developer can pick the one which will be probably the best, at least at first iteration. And if we need to change later, if we need to iterate further, once again, in 10 minutes, I can create a bunch of new low fidelity wireframes, so we can very quickly change plans. Let's move on to mid fidelity. So you see the same layout, now a little bit more polished up, a little bit more elevated. This is what we call mid fidelity, middle fidelity. Now we have 5 lifecycle variations, just for the sake of example: live, coming soon, deprecated, and retired, with different colors, of course. So we can play a little bit around length, color, layout. Now the text is realistic. It's still a placeholder text, but it's not lorem ipsum anymore. So we get a feeling of size and layout. Now we have a little bit of last updated marker there. The links are also realistic. They're not just saying link, but having realistic text. So we can understand better what it will look like. And at this phase, the client can easily pinpoint like failed context, failed content. We are not using that kind of language, for example. We are not using that kind of phrase. Maybe they don't call it API overview, but call it API documentation. Okay, easy. We can now catch this problem early on. And we can also put some warning message on the top. Maybe it was recently updated, or it is going to be soon deprecated. This little blue bar, or it can be red, it can be orange. It is a great way to raise awareness to a change. And now you see these little API cards placed in a complex layout. We have a header, we have a hero. You've probably seen this many, many times. This is a typical developer portal catalog look. On the left-hand side, we have a local navigation, a filtering and search, and we have a grid of cards. The cards are the same we showed you in the previous slide. And we can still experiment with local navigation. On the left-hand side, you see a filtering. On the bottom left, a filtering option where you can filter in the life cycle. While on the right-hand side, you can see a drop-down. Moni, if you would be so kind to zoom on a little bit to show the drop. Yeah, the drop down on the upper right hand corner of the second screen. So we can experiment with, for example, a drop down like solution, or on the left hand side, we can experiment with a filtering kind solution. And there might be legal, technical, security, or many other reasons why you as a client prefer one or would like to avoid the other. This is the point when we can discuss it, and this is the point when we can find out what works best for you. Thank you very much. Interaction design. Let's talk a little bit about interaction design. This is something which is often overlooked in the name of rapid, quick, fast development. But interaction design is important. At least for us UX designers, it is very important. Complex interaction have complex states, of course. Complex drop-down, a multi-select drop-down, or a multi-filter categorization box has a lot of complex states. We need to understand what are these states, because eventually we need to develop them. Eventually we need to answer these. And it might come that there are some special states, some which are not by industry standard. So if we focus on interaction design early on, we can understand how these interactions will work for you as a client and how these interactions can serve you, your use case the best. And of course, interactions also have a lot of dependencies, extra content, special behavior, pop-ups, whatever. Different fidelity levels have different interaction depth. At low fidelity, we have just placeholder interactions, just a drop down. We just put a drop down there, and everybody knows there will be a drop down. But as we upgrade the fidelity, as we level up to mid-fi, we need to design the statuses of the drop down. We need to understand, okay, what possible interaction elements do we have? How do they react to each other? What happens if I click here? What happens if I click there? And at high fidelity, it might even turn into a clickable prototype. So we can show how it works at a mock, but it still shows how it works. On the next screen, we are going to show you some mid-fidelity interaction states. For example, a search bar. Of course, it is very standard looking. We have a base state, a focus state, activation state. We need to define error state. An error state might need to have a message like what was the error. For example, you only use 2 characters and the minimum is 3 characters. For example, we can have a passive state which even tells you, sorry, this block is passive. You cannot act. It's a disabled search bar because you cannot search here. And the same with the dropdown. Okay, so how does a dropdown look like? How does a dropdown work when we open them, when we click on it? Does it highlight? Does it show what I selected? How does it look like after I selected it? How I can remove my selection? These are very minor questions, of course, but this is the point where we need to answer these questions. And once again, I'm going to ask you, Moni, to zoom in a little bit. On the left-hand side, you see search results. So what happens if I type into the search bar a phrase like management, and I also use a filter and also a lifecycle dropdown on the right-hand side. So we have three interactions: a search, a filter, and a lifecycle dropdown. What does it yield? How does it look like? What it doesn't show? How does it highlight the results? And on the right-hand side, we're going to see something, what happens if there are no results. If the combination of search, filtering, and lifecycle has no results there, we need to inform the client, we need to inform the user, the consumer, how they can change it, how they can make it better, how they can find what they're looking for eventually. So they might need to change the lifecycle dropdown, or they need to change the search text. Or if nothing helps, here is a link. Click on it, contact us, let's chat, let's talk, let's solve your problem. And last but not least, I have a screen for you about inclusive design. It is something which is often overlooked, which is often avoided, once again in the name of quick, rapid development. And I can understand interaction design and specifically inclusive design can mean a little bit of hindrance, but in the long run, it really, really matters. A few years ago, it was often called accessive design or accessibility. Well, I don't really like that word. We do not give access. We design from the bottom up to be inclusive. So instead of opening a tiny door on a wall, let's just move the wall away and let everybody come in as a figure of speech. We at Pronovix follow industry standards. At the moment, we say J3.0. We are starting to move on to that. And also in-house design guidelines. We have a long list of content-related, design-related, visual-related, text-related, inclusive mindset guides. And we have inclusive design kits. And at the last leg of our today's discussion, we have a little bit of time left. Could you please go one back, Moni? Thank you very much. If you zoom on the left card, I purposefully created a lot of accessibility foes, a lot of mistakes. Just look at it. If you want, you can try to find a few here. What is wrong with this from an accessibility or inclusivity viewpoint? Let me tell some, like the date updated 03/13. Which one is the month? Which one is the day? Which one is the year? Who knows? Contrast problems. The life cycle info is represented by a green dot. So if you are not great with identifying colors, if your monitor is not great with colors, or you want to read it, it cannot identify the life cycle because a green dot is just a green dot. On the right-hand side, a different type of problematic card. All the things, all the little pins are put into one row. So it's hard to identify which is the life cycle and which is the category. The body text is way too big. It's shouting at your face. And the links are not really informative. Read more and details. These are not really telling me what is going to happen. And also the contrast is a little bit off. It's too black and white. It's too vibrating on certain older style of monitors. So these are just a few examples of what happens if you don't focus on inclusive design. And the reason why I brought you the negative example is because everything else we showed you previously was the positive example. And a good inclusive design is usually just good design. A lot of inclusive design principles are just good design principles. So I wanted to show you some blaring examples of how things can go wrong. Thank you very much for your attention. And Moni, thank you very much for your help with the slides. And Chris, the mic is yours.
Sure, thank you both. This was very illuminating and fascinating, even for me as an insider.